mentioned too about this is that it's kind of like for short weekend trips around your area. It's not really meant to take you to Tahiti or anything like that. But as you said, does it really fit into their broader business of selling books and washing machines and all sorts of other things? I mean, Amazon Local in general to me seems like more of a side project to that. But if they can build the number of eyeballs to Amazon Local like they have on their regular site, then sure, we'll sell you more stuff. So that's kind of the play that I see.
I think it's one thing for companies like Google to be in all kinds of random businesses, and for companies like Facebook to have flying drones and all the rest. But Amazon is a company that basically operates near zero margin. They have very low margins. They try to not make very much profit so they can plow all of their revenue back into the business, and so that they can grow, so they can clobber competitors and so on. Do you think that they're overextending themselves with all these new services they've been announcing recently?
So that's been the question for years about Amazon, right? And they don't seem to be letting up much at all. When Jeff Bezos was in New York a couple months ago for a Business Insider conference, he kind of directly addressed this idea of at least, we're gonna keep trying to hit home runs. We're not going to succeed every single time, but we're going to keep trying to take risks. And that kind of, to me, seemed like a reference that they're not going to really kind of give up on various moonshots and different services and different projects. I think during that talk, he mentioned how AWS, their public cloud business, was kind of just started out of nowhere, and Amazon sold books before, so why would they get into the public cloud? Well, that's become a really important and really big business for them. So from my interpretation, it seems that Bezos wants to keep finding those types of home runs. Not all of these are going to end up making it, but they're going to keep trying. Particularly in the travel and leisure segment, that's a really competitive area. But if they find that they're getting even a little bit of traction on it, then they have reason to keep going.
And they also, I have to say, have a bit of Google envy. They tend to get into the businesses that Google gets into. I don't know if that's by coincidence or because they're just really gunning for Google. A lot of times companies in the tech industry become obsessed with other companies, and they spend a lot of effort trying to emulate and beat them on every front. But we'll see how they do with this destinations service. Ben Fox Rubin is at CNET.com, and you can follow him on Twitter at Ben Fox Rubin. Thanks for joining us today, Ben.
Thanks.
Writing for the Wall Street Journal, Evelyn Rusli says that Google and Facebook's race to connect the next billion people that we've talked about a lot on the show is a lot harder than it sounds. In fact, she says internet user growth is actually slowing down. Evelyn joins us now. Welcome to you, Evelyn.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on. Now, Google Executive Chairman Eric Schmidt once said that I think it was 2 years ago, said that everyone in the world would be connected by the end of the decade. Are we anywhere near being on track to make that happen?
Yeah, it seems very unlikely, despite all the talk of drones and balloons and high-tech satellites, which we know both Facebook and Google are working on. I traveled to Indonesia with a very kind of open mind on, looking into this issue of connectivity in emerging markets. And it was surprising to find that it wasn't just about tech and it wasn't just about affordability that kept people offline, but it's these very soft issues, this idea of many people don't even know why they would want a smartphone or why they want to be on the internet, that these tech giants are going to have to battle. And so because of this pain point, I imagine it will be very hard to meet that goal of getting everyone online by the end of the decade.
Now, you wrote that, speaking of Indonesia, that Indonesia is a huge country. 250 million people live in Indonesia, and only 16% of that population is connected to the internet. I think they're a good, sort of mental exercise for what could happen. What would happen if Indonesia's sort of population became immensely connected as a lot of other companies, north of 50%? How would this change their economy?
It's a very interesting question. I think we're sort of seeing it play out in real time, at least, in the early innings. When I was in Jakarta, they clearly had a very nascent e-commerce business, for instance. but it is starting to pick up. You do see people become more comfortable with using their phones, with becoming active members of the digital economy. I think this is like Indonesia currently. There's a lot of social barriers, a lot of like this uncomfortableness with the internet. And for example, Indonesia has had issues with scams, for instance, in the past, and there's a lot of mistrust or lack of trust when it comes to using online payments and considering also the compound the lack of banking system in Indonesia. So these countries, I think, represent enormous opportunity for what could happen. I mean, you see in some of these capitals, like in Jakarta, that a lot of people do really enjoy the social aspect. Once they do get on their smartphones, they're incredibly active, which is why Indonesia is so active on Twitter and Facebook consistently. So the small population that is using the internet regularly, but there's still a long way to go. So I think what will happen to Indonesia when that day passes, when up to 50% or more people are online, is really fascinating. But it does feel like it's a long way off.
Now, I'm sorry to interrupt this interview, but we have breaking news, which is that Google's Project Fi, which is the wireless service that we talked about at the top of the show, has now launched. And if you want to check that out, go to Fi, that's fi.google.com, and you can check that out. So again, Google's wireless service now exists. There's a video and lots of details on that website. Again, that's fi.google.com. Now, Evelyn, speaking of Google, companies like Google and Facebook have hatched all kinds of crazy schemes. You mentioned some of them, but they involve balloons and drones and satellites and all these kinds of things to reach people in remote areas. These are pretty splashy efforts. Are these the kind of things that are going to make it happen, or are these just, or is it other things? I guess the real question is, what is it that's preventing people from getting online? Is it financial? Is it educational? Is it physical? Something that could be overcome by balloons? Is it political? What